when that movie came out. Was anything cut from that film?
The studio actually legally couldn't trim it. They couldn't cut anything.
Blazing Saddles is wild, offensive, and unforgettable, but even after 50 years, there's one scene that no one noticed, a blooper so bold, so strange, it was almost too outrageous to be real. From fart jokes and Yiddish-speaking cowboys to secret casting disasters and deleted scenes too shocking to air, the truth behind this movie is way messier than you think. What did Mel Brooks hide? Why was one line cut before anyone ever saw it? And how did a total stranger end up in the final shot? Let's discover why Blazing Saddles still matters. When Blazing Saddles hit theaters in 1974, people didn't know whether to laugh or walk out. It tore apart the cowboy myth, made fun of racism right to its face, and ended with a movie set brawl that breaks the fourth wall. It was offensive, it was loud, and somehow it worked. But why was it ever made? How did it survive the censors? And what's the huge blooper in Blazing Saddles that nobody noticed until now? To understand the chaos and brilliance of Blazing Saddles, you have to understand where America was in 1974. The Vietnam War had just ended in shame. Watergate had exploded. Nixon was on the verge of resignation. Trust in government was low. The civil rights movement had won legal victories, but racism was still deeply embedded in American life, especially in the movies. Hollywood westerns still portrayed white men as heroes and everyone else as background noise. Mel Brooks didn't just want to spoof westerns, he wanted to blow them up. Blazing Saddles is set in the Old West, but it's really about 1970s America. The plot is deceptively simple. A greedy land developer, desperate to drive settlers out of a town called Rock Ridge, convinces the governor to appoint a black sheriff, expecting the townspeople to panic and flee. But the new sheriff, Bart, played by Cleavon Little, proves to be cleverer, sharper, and more capable than anyone expects. What begins as a racist con turns into a bizarre, genre-breaking rebellion, with Bart leading the charge against both the villains and the small-minded town that tried to destroy him. On the surface, it looks like a slapstick comedy, but underneath the gags and sound effects is a dangerous idea, that racism, when exposed to light and laughter, crumbles. That's what made Blazing Saddles so powerful and so controversial. Audiences weren't used to hearing the N-word in a comedy, even when it was used to mock bigotry itself. They weren't used to toilet humor in mainstream movies. They definitely weren't used to a black hero outsmarting every white man in town. Brooks was pushing every line he could think of, and a few he probably didn't. Mel Brooks directed the film, but he didn't do it alone. One of his co-writers was Richard Pryor, the most fearless black comedian of the era. Pryor knew how to write jokes that bit down hard. He helped shape Bart into a character who wasn't just cool and clever, but fully aware of the absurdity of his situation. Pryor had originally been considered to play Bart himself, but the studio refused to insure him because of his history with harmful substances. That decision may have changed the tone of the film entirely. Cleavon Little brought Broadway polish and deadpan wit. Pryor brought fire to the script. The film went after everyone, racists, politicians, cowboys, actors, old-school studio bosses. No one was safe. It shattered the idea that satire had to be subtle. Blazing Saddles wasn't interested in being polite. It wanted to slap you across the face, then make you laugh at how ridiculous the slap was. It mixed lowbrow and high concept, and it didn't care who it offended, as long as the audience got the point. The result, a film that could never be made the same way today. Even the way the movie ends is a statement. Instead of sticking to its Old West setting, Blazing Saddles breaks through the literal walls of the Warner Brothers studio, spilling into other soundstages, Hollywood streets, and eventually a theater showing the very same movie. It's a mess. It's absurd. It's genius. The characters become aware that they're in a movie. The satire eats itself alive, and Mel Brooks closes the loop with pure chaos. It's one of the first self-aware endings in American comedy, and it set the stage for everything from Ferris Bueller to Deadpool. But even in all this madness, something slipped through, a moment so subtle that it took decades for anyone to notice it. And once you see it, you'll never unsee it. The most shocking scene in Blazing Saddles didn't make it into the movie. It's not a blooper. It's not a prank. And it's not some backstage accident. It's a deleted moment so outrageous, so charged, and so unforgettable that even Mel Brooks, the man who put flatulence on the big screen, decided he couldn't go through with it. And here's the real twist, most people didn't even know this scene existed until recently. It was hidden in plain sight, buried in interviews and recollections, quietly mentioned but never shown. Now it's resurfaced, and it changes everything you thought you knew about the film. So what was the scene? Why was it cut? And why is it so important now? In the final cut of Blazing Saddles, we get a brief, funny bedroom exchange between the glamorous Lily Von Shtupp, played by Madeline Kahn, and Sheriff Bart, portrayed by Cleavon Little. It's flirtatious, it's suggestive, but it's nothing compared to what was originally shot. In the deleted version, Lily and Bart are in her dressing room after sharing a candlelit meal, complete with the cheeky term schneiten, which itself is a not-so-subtle euphemism. As the lights go out and the screen fades to black, Lily's voice cuts through the dark in a heavy German accent. "Oh, is it true what they say about you people? How well you are built. Is it true?" There's a pause. The audience is left hanging. And then comes the punchline, "I hate to disillusion you, ma'am, but you're sucking on my arm." In a single beat, the film would have taken a massive risk, touching on the long-standing stereotype about black male anatomy, flipping it into comedy, and then undercutting it with a deadpan line. That one moment would have combined race, physicality, satire, and innuendo in a way that was arguably more explosive than anything else in the film. And yet it never made it in because even for a film like Blazing Saddles, there were limits. Mel Brooks has spoken about this scene in interviews, including one with Conan O'Brien. He explained that it just felt like too much, going past the point of satire and into something he worried would overshadow everything else. As someone who was trying to walk the tightrope between humor and commentary, he decided it wasn't worth the risk, so he shelved it. But that wasn't the only moment that got cut. There's another piece of dialogue that has floated around in production notes and crew memories. In this scene, Lily Von Stupp is once again turning up the charm, preparing to seduce Bart. On the surface, she's telling him to take off his ammunition belt, but the phrase is clearly meant to sound like something else, an invitation delivered in a sultry tone. It's a throwaway line, but one loaded with meaning. And then there's the third moment, a less defined but equally provocative exchange that never made it past the script stage. Several early drafts of Blazing Saddles featured a more hands-on version of Lily's famous seduction of Bart. In this version, Lily not only asks about the stereotype that black men are well endowed, she tries to see it for herself. The scene walks right up to the line of physical contact and crosses into territory that would be considered deeply controversial even today. But the comedy lies in Bart's reaction, cool, unimpressed, and ultimately dismissive. What makes all of this so fascinating is that Brooks himself has later said he regrets cutting some of these scenes. In interviews, he's admitted that he may have overcorrected, that he wanted the film to push the envelope and then stopped short of going all the way. His concern was that people wouldn't get it, that they'd misread the joke, or worse. In one conversation, he said, "Maybe I got scared." So here's the question, what would Blazing Saddles have looked like with those scenes left in? Would it still be celebrated as a classic, or would it have been banned, buried, or forgotten? There's no clear answer, but it does show us something important. This wasn't just shock for shock's sake. These scenes were part of a larger effort to tear down the polite facade of Hollywood storytelling. Brooks wasn't just trying to make you laugh, he was trying to make you uncomfortable, to expose racism not just as a problem but as a ridiculous system of beliefs propped up by fear, ignorance, and power. And that's where Blazing Saddles becomes more than just a comedy. It becomes a landmark in satirical filmmaking. It's a movie that used humor like a surgeon's tool, cutting deep, exposing nerves, and daring the audience to flinch. The scenes that stayed in are legendary for their brazenness. But the scenes that got cut, they show us the edge Brooks was walking. They show us how close he came to going even further. And they remind us that sometimes the real story isn't what you see on screen, it's what almost made it in. One of the most iconic moments in Blazing Saddles is the campfire scene where cowboys eat beans and audibly pass gas, a first in Hollywood history. In 1974, no major film had ever included a flatulence gag with full sound. And Mel Brooks didn't just allow it, he doubled down. After the initial cut, he actually went back and added more fart sounds in post-production. Why? Because the test audiences were laughing so hard they couldn't hear the end of the joke. And because Brooks knew what the studio didn't, this wasn't just toilet humor. This was something bigger. For decades, Westerns had romanticized the cowboy as strong, silent, heroic, always stoic and clean. Brooks wanted to break that illusion. He wanted to show cowboys not as mythic figures but as real, stinky, sweaty men who ate too much and slept in the dirt. It destroyed the nice, polished image Hollywood had spent decades creating. And audiences loved it. But the executives at Warner Brothers weren't laughing. They called the scene vulgar, lowbrow, and pointless. Brooks ignored their concerns and kept the scene, helping to redefine what could be shown, and mocked, in mainstream comedy. This commitment to chaos didn't stop with sound effects. It extended all the way to the film's climactic battle, which spills out of the fictional town of Rock Ridge and onto the Warner Brothers lot itself. The final sequence is a deliberate, absurd breakdown of the fourth wall. Characters fight through fake saloons, crash into a musical number, and end up on a Hollywood street where the action continues in front of a real theater. It's meant to feel chaotic and ridiculous, but even within that chaos, something happened that no one planned. As the cast runs out of the studio gate and into the street, a man wearing a sweater walks calmly through the middle of the shot. He's not an extra. He's not in costume. He's not part of the film. He was just walking by, a random pedestrian who happened to stumble onto a live set while the cameras were rolling. Instead of cutting the shot or trying to remove him, Mel Brooks told the crew, "Leave him in. It's funny." And he was right. The man's presence, confused, casual, oblivious, adds another layer of absurdity to a scene already packed with it. He became accidentally part of cinematic history, a living blooper that was never corrected. These accidental moments became the film's best features. Brooks had built a filmmaking style around unpredictability. He encouraged his actors to improvise, to break character, to play with timing. In some cases, the best moments in the film weren't even in the script. Gene Wilder's delivery as the Waco Kid was so relaxed, so offhand, that he often changed his lines in the moment. Cleavon Little's facial reactions, dry tone, and quiet sarcasm gave Bart an intelligence that wasn't written but emerged on set. Madeline Kahn, who played Lily Von Stupp, improvised several of her most famous lines, including her breathy, off-key performance of "I'm Tired." Brooks didn't just allow this chaos, he wanted it. He believed that comedy came from freedom, not control, that a perfectly timed mistake was sometimes funnier than a scripted joke. Nowhere is that philosophy more obvious than in the scene with the Yiddish-speaking Native Americans. In a flashback to Bart's childhood, he and his family are surrounded by a group of warriors on horseback. It looks like the beginning of a massacre. But then the tribal chief, played by Mel Brooks himself, speaks. And it's not Apache or Sioux or any indigenous language. It's Yiddish. Full sentences delivered fluently. The other warriors nod in agreement. One even shouts, "Shabbos." It's jarring. It's surreal. And it's hilarious. But what does it mean? Brooks knew exactly what he was doing by having the Native Americans speak a Jewish dialect. He was calling attention to how Hollywood westerns had historically treated indigenous peoples. They were often portrayed as the other, a foreign enemy, rarely humanized, almost never given real language. By giving them Yiddish, Brooks pointed out how shallow and foolish those portrayals really were. The scene works because it's unexpected, but it lingers because it says something real. That blend of absurdity and satire also shows up in the film's opening theme. The song, titled simply Blazing Saddles, is performed with absolute sincerity by Frankie Laine, a famous Western balladeer known for serious emotional vocals. His voice is rich, powerful, and heartfelt, and that's exactly what Brooks wanted. He told the crew not to let Laine know it was a comedy. In Laine's mind, he was singing the theme to a dramatic epic. Every line, every note is delivered like it belongs in High Noon. But the lyrics, full of exaggerated cliches and over-the-top imagery, tell a completely different story. The result is pure irony, a song so serious it becomes ridiculous, anchored by a performance that never gets the joke. Mel Brooks understood that comedy wasn't always about telling jokes. Sometimes it was about building a world so absurd that the audience couldn't help but laugh. Sometimes it was about inviting accidents in and letting them stay. All those instances of toilet humor, racy jokes, and bloopers that stayed in the final cut, all of them were part of the same idea, that chaos could be powerful, that comedy didn't have to be polished. It just had to be fearless. And that's what separates Blazing Saddles from other comedies of its time. The film is full of scenes that look like they're about to fall apart, but that's the point. The humor lives in the chaos, the improvisation, and the real-time decisions that weren't cleaned up in the editing room. So if you've ever wondered how a movie filled with fart jokes, fake horses, and accidental walk-ons became one of the most revered comedies in film history, the answer is this: it wasn't an accident. It was deliberate chaos, controlled enough to work, wild enough to feel real, and fearless enough to change the rules of comedy forever. When Warner Brothers saw the final cut of Blazing Saddles, they panicked. The screening room was dead silent. Executives didn't laugh. They didn't clap. One reportedly said it was too vulgar for American audiences. Another called it career-ending. And yet, sitting in that very same room, Mel Brooks was convinced they were all wrong. What happens when a director believes in a movie that the studio wants to kill? What happens when the biggest entertainment company in Hollywood tries to bury a film only to watch it become a cultural earthquake? Mel Brooks didn't just direct Blazing Saddles, he owned it. He had final cut authority written into his contract. That meant the studio legally couldn't alter or censor his film without his permission. For most filmmakers, this is a dream. For Warner Brothers, it became a nightmare. Because the film broke every rule, and that scared the studio more than anything. Ted Ashley, who was head of Warner Brothers at the time, made it clear he wanted the film buried, quietly, respectfully, without fanfare. According to industry insiders, Ashley told his team to release the film in just a few major cities and then quietly pull it. The idea was to test the waters. If it flopped, nobody would notice. If it caused controversy, they could blame the filmmaker. It was a common tactic for movies the studio didn't believe in. But Mel Brooks had other plans. He wasn't new to this kind of resistance. His earlier film The Producers had already challenged people's comfort zones with its plot about a musical called Springtime for Hitler. It had earned him an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay. But that didn't mean Blazing Saddles was guaranteed to work. It was riskier. It was louder. And it had no interest in playing safe. Brooks believed that what he had created wasn't just funny, it was the kind of funny that made people question the world around them. He said, "This will make people laugh harder than anything they've ever seen." But that conviction would be tested almost immediately. Because the production of Blazing Saddles started off rocky. For one, the casting process was a disaster. Richard Pryor, who co-wrote the script with Brooks, was the original choice to play Sheriff Bart. He had the perfect mix of intelligence, edge, and comedic timing. But there was one problem: Warner Brothers wouldn't insure him. Pryor had a reputation for harmful substance use, and he had recently been arrested for narcotics possession. The studio labeled him a known risk. Without insurance, he couldn't legally work on set. Pryor stayed on as a writer, but the role went to Cleavon Little, a Broadway actor with no major film credits at the time. That wasn't the only casting issue. The role of the Waco Kid was first given to Gig Young, a seasoned actor with an Academy Award under his belt. On paper, it made sense. Young had the weathered look and the dry delivery. But there was a problem the studio didn't catch in time: Young was battling alcoholism. On his first day on set, he collapsed while filming the scene where he wakes up in a jail cell. Production shut down. Brooks was furious. He needed a last-minute replacement. That's when he called Gene Wilder. Wilder had worked with Brooks before on The Producers, and they trusted each other. When Brooks described the Waco Kid character, a washed-up gunfighter with a drinking problem and a heart of gold, Wilder immediately said yes. He flew out to the set and started filming the next day. His performance would go on to become one of the most iconic parts of the film. Wilder brought a sense of calm and weirdness to the chaos around him. His timing was flawless, and his chemistry with Cleavon Little gave the film the emotional core it needed to stay grounded amid the absurdity. Even so, Blazing Saddles didn't look like a winner on paper. John Wayne was offered a cameo in the film, and he turned it down flat. He said it was too blue for his image. That's old-school Hollywood code for too dirty. Wayne reportedly told Brooks, "I can't be in it, but I'll be first in line to see it." That kind of reaction only reinforced how dangerous the film seemed to insiders. The fact that Brooks had full control didn't help either. Studios like predictability, not improvisation. But when the film finally premiered in February 1974, the results stunned everyone. The limited release in New York, LA, and Chicago exploded in popularity. Some theaters extended their runs indefinitely. Warner Brothers, realizing they had completely misread the situation, scrambled to expand distribution. Suddenly, the movie that was supposed to be buried became the biggest comedy hit of the year, earning over $100 million by the end of its run, all thanks to one director who decided to battle an entire system to get his vision on screen. Richard Pryor was supposed to be the star of Blazing Saddles. He co-wrote the film, helped shape its sharpest jokes, and was the clear choice to play Bart, the cool, quick-witted black sheriff at the center of the story. But when it came time to cast the role, the studio stepped in. Warner Brothers refused to insure Pryor because of his history with harmful substance use, including a recent arrest for narcotics possession. In legal and production terms, this meant he was considered too risky to hire. Internally, one executive even referred to him as a well-known sniffer. Without insurance, Pryor couldn't appear in the film, even though it was built around his voice and vision. That left the production in a difficult spot. They needed someone who could carry the weight of the satire, keep up with the rapid-fire comedy, and hold their own as the lead in a film that was taking massive creative risks. That person turned out to be Cleavon Little, a trained stage actor with Broadway credits. Little brought a different kind of energy to Bart, cool, polished, and slightly detached. His performance is measured, ironic, and full of dry charm. Where Pryor might have played Bart with more fire, Little played him with precision, and it worked. His delivery made the racial satire sharper. When Bart is forced to pull a gun on himself to escape a lynch mob, Little doesn't overplay it. He keeps it calm, even as the situation is absurd. That balance between seriousness and comedy was critical, and it's part of why the film still lands today. Still, the casting process didn't get easier from there. The role of the Waco Kid was originally given to Gig Young, an Oscar-winning actor with a history of dramatic roles. On paper, it made sense. The Waco Kid is a legendary gunslinger turned alcoholic who hides out in the town jail. But he also had a serious drinking problem. During his very first scene, where the Waco Kid hangs upside down in a jail cell, crew members quickly realized he was experiencing alcohol withdrawal. Production halted. Brooks fired him immediately and began looking for a replacement. He didn't have to look far. Gene Wilder had already worked with Mel Brooks on The Producers and was known for his ability to deliver strange, sensitive, and unpredictable characters. Brooks called him in a panic. Wilder agreed to take the role, flew out the next day, and started filming almost immediately. His performance as the Waco Kid, equal parts spaced-out wisdom and bone-dry sarcasm, became one of the most memorable elements of the film. Wilder brought a calm, surreal quality that helped ground the chaos around him. His chemistry with Cleavon Little was immediate and effortless. Together, they created a dynamic that mirrored the entire film, two outsiders navigating a world that's lost its mind. Harvey Korman played Hedley Lamar, the oily, greedy villain behind the scheme to destroy Rock Ridge. His performance walks the line between Shakespearean villain and sketch comedy. Korman delivers his lines with such theatrical flourish that they border on parody, but never quite tip over. That control is what made the character work. Korman wasn't just funny, he was committed. He treated Lamar like a real person, not a cartoon. That helped make his lines land harder. One of the running jokes in the film is that everyone mispronounces his name as Hedy, referencing real-life actress Hedy Lamar. The joke was so persistent that the real Lamar threatened to sue Mel Brooks for using her name. Rather than drag it through court, Brooks settled privately. He later joked that she should have been flattered. After all, how many villains get named after Hollywood royalty? Then there was Alex Karras as Mongo, the unstoppable brute who punches a horse, rides into town on a bull, and delivers one of the film's most surreal moments, Mongo only pawn in Game of Life. Karras wasn't an actor by trade. He was a former NFL defensive tackle who played 12 seasons with the Detroit Lions and was named to the All-Decade Team for the 1960s. Brooks cast him because he needed someone who looked physically imposing but could also deliver comedy. Karras nailed it. His deadpan timing made Mongo more than a thug. He became a weird, lovable force of nature, part of the film's unpredictable rhythm. Each of these actors brought something essential to Blazing Saddles. Brooks trusted them to improvise, to take chances, to shape the film in real time. That's why they managed to survive the chaos of the production, and more than that, they thrived in it. They found humor in the absurdity. They committed to roles that could have easily fallen flat. And they understood that the film wasn't just telling jokes, it was making a point that required skill, timing, and a willingness to push limits. These were not typical studio actors going through the motions. They were working with a director who gave them permission to go all in. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.